The county clerk is elected every 4 years, and so I was first elected in 1998. I was appointed to fill out the vacancy. My predecessor died suddenly, and so I finished up her term, and then I was first elected in 1998. So I'm in the middle of a term for, actually it's my 5th term as county clerk. It kind of surprises me that how long that time has been. It seemed like it's been just a short while, just yesterday. So time flies when you're having fun, and it has been fun. It's a very interesting job being a county clerk. Lori Palmer knows the thing about being clerk is that it seems like everything that happens in government that they don't know what to do, or it's a job that nobody else wants to do, gets put onto the clerk. I've been very proud to be the chief election authority in the county. So that's one of the main jobs, is just putting on the election. And I think that's, before I became involved in this, it's just something that I took for granted. And I frequently talk to people about that, is that, well, it's the election's coming up, I'm going to be very busy. And they'll immediately start thinking in terms of running for office. Oh, really, you're running? Well, no, I'm in charge of the logistics of putting the elections on. This is the best way I can describe that job. What I do on election day, what we do on election day, is we open up 225 branch offices in roughly 180 locations, using 1,200 temporary employees that may or may not have paid any attention at the training, who by law, there's no supervisor. Now, among those 100 or 1,200 election judges, no one of them is a supervisor. They're all equal. And just to make things just a little more interesting, I don't even get to pick who the election judges are. And yet, somehow election day comes and it goes. I mean, anybody that's involved in construction would think, well, we have deadlines in construction, but election day is a hard deadline. Well, no, you can't go back and say, hey, we didn't get this part of it done, so we're going to have election day next week instead of on Tuesday. It doesn't happen. It has to happen on election day. So in the course of printing ballots, in the course of putting together the packets, in the course of hiring the election judges and training the election judges and scheduling the polling places, we also have to kind of interface with the public and try to make that experience of going to the polls as pleasant as possible. Let's face it, I mean, we're asking people to take time out of their busy days to participate in democracy, so it's kind of incumbent upon us to try to make that a pleasant experience. I think we've accomplished that in Madison County, and it is. It's a tribute to those 1,200 people who volunteer. Of course, they're paid, but let's face it, there's a lot more that goes into it than what the compensation is. They get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to show up at the polls at 5 so that it can be open at 6. They stay there all day long. There's no shifts. Although polls are open from 6 a.m. till 7 p.m., there are no shifts. They are there the entire time. And they're not done at 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, what they have to do is they have to finish up paperwork and balance everything. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but that's one of the things we have to do. Is we have 100 voters, we have 100 ballots. All it has to be balanced out and make sure that the paperwork works, and then everything is put together and brought back under seal and sequestered and put under lock and key, so that if there's any question, if there's any kind of recount, we're able to go back and establish exactly what happened in any one of those 225 precincts, 225 different places that occurred. Fantastic when you think about that happening all the way across the country on that. It makes you kind of wonder, why things like 2000, when in 2000 the election wasn't actually resolved for president for 45 days. because the state of Florida, they really didn't know what happened to certain ballots, whether or not there was a ballot count, and it went back and forth until it finally was resolved by the courts. So after that debacle, it's really nothing more than a debacle. I mean, regardless of how you feel about who the president was that came out of it, it cast doubts on the election process. So what happens when we cast doubts on something? Congress got involved. I do find it interesting that you know, that the word for moving forward, the word for fixing things, or actually making things move forward, is progress. And then if you think in terms of progress, what would be the opposite of progress? I would guess that it would be Congress. But nevertheless, Congress decided to get involved, and Congress passed the Help America Vote Act. This is the most amazing thing, is that what they actually did was, when they passed the Help America Vote Act, they authorized $5 billion to fix the election process. Of course, whenever they give money out, it never comes free. Free? No, it's not free. You have requirements, all these different things that you have to do. One of the things that happens with that you would learn in your civics class is the difference between authorization and appropriation are sometimes a little bit different. Authorizing, well, you could spend up to $5 billion on elections. Did they actually appropriate $5 billion? No. They actually appropriated. They actually agreed to spend $2 billion on it. Just a little bit different. Still, $2 billion, a lot of money. But if you think about it, that's actually spread out over, let me see, there's about 10,000 jurisdictions. 10,000 jurisdictions like the County of Madison that put on elections. So when you divide $2 billion by 10,000, you actually find out that there wasn't enough money to actually do what they told us we have to do. Here's what I can report to you about Madison County, though. Madison County was ahead of the curve. Madison County, and you know, I could break my arm, pat myself on the back, but it just seemed I had to have help from the county board. I had to help from all of you. That in 1998 we dealt with punch cards. Well, we had been using punch cards for 24 years. Punch cards, you would not know what punch cards are, but believe it or not, back in those days, or back in ancient times, I think it was right around the time that the Greek were still praying to Zeus, that they used these little cards that they punched holes in, and then they fed them into a machine that talked to the computer. There weren't keyboards, there were key punch machines, and they used these cards to talk to computers. Well, by 1960s, what they decided to do was use these cards to have people knock holes out. They put them actually into a little booklet, and they use that to punch a hole in the card to show who they voted for. Well, by 1998, but by the year 2000, putting holes in a card seemed like a very strange thing to most people, but it was something that we were used to doing for 27 years in how we voted. Well, what happened is that I made the case in 1998 that we should switch away from punch cards and we should go to a newer technology. The newer technology was optical scan, and what it allowed us to do was to use a pen to mark on a paper ballot and feed the paper ballot into this optical scan reader, and we recorded the votes that way. We got rid of punch cards. What I knew, and I didn't make a big deal out of it, was that those punch cards were very inaccurate. A lot of things happened, and it came up in the 2000 election, is that they had things like hanging chads, where instead of punching the hole out, they punched out a portion of the hole, but then as it read through the reading machine, it still looked like the hole was closed, so no vote was registered. Even though the person intended to vote for him, the hole was closed, so no vote was registered. In fact, the rate of times that people made a mistake on their punch cards in the state in the year 2000 was 7%. 7% of the ballots cast for president had some kind of mistake where no vote was counted. 7%. Now the good news is in Madison County, we had these optical scan readers that the county board and the taxpayers had invested in. Our rate of error was less than 0.5%. 0.5% versus, nothing's perfect, but 0.5% versus the state average of 7%. A good investment, I think. And what that came from was a fund that the county board, through the years, had set aside for big purchases. That they didn't have to go out and raise taxes to do it. They had a savings account for big purchases that they had set aside through the years. I just want to point that out because that's something that survives today. And it's something now I've been involved, although I've been county clerk now for 15 years, I've been involved in county government for 25 years, and I'm proud of Madison County. Most counties in the state of Illinois, as a matter of fact, it's a majority, more than 50% of the counties in the state of Illinois have to borrow money. They have to go out and borrow money to meet their payroll before the property tax dollars start to come in. In other words, they run out of money, they send out the property tax bills, they have to wait 4 months before the money actually is collected and they can start meeting their payroll. So they borrow. I mean, that's just astounding to me that they're in that shape. But in Madison County, our biggest problem is that we have to worry about whether or not we're getting enough return on our investments of the reserve funds that we have set aside. Now, one argument would be, now, what are they doing sitting on $50 million of taxpayers' dollars? Why don't they give us a tax rebate? Why don't they give it back to us? Well, here's the thing about Madison County is that they're not going to spend it, but it helps to have that reserve. 4 months actually of our total budget is there held in reserve, and we're a little bit fatter than that. But if the state, which you might have heard, the state isn't really good at meeting its obligations, doesn't make their payments, we're not in a position of having to go out and borrow from the bank and pay interest on that. We're in a position we can pay our bills, we can actually sustain normal course of business without having to have interruption of services. That's one example. Another example is that, quite simply, we're not in debt. We're not borrowing money. Why is it important that you don't have debt? Well, we're not paying interest on money that to a bank, so we're not having to charge that to the taxpayers. The reserve has been built up through the years through prudent financial stewardship. And I know that what you came here for today was to hear about prudent financial stewardship. Sorry. Actually, what I got off on a tangent here because I wanted to talk about something kind of very interesting. We are in the 200th anniversary of Madison County. We will celebrate the bicentennial of the county. September the 14th in 1812 was when Madison County was formed as a county. Now you'll recall that 1818 is when Illinois became a state, so Madison County precedes the state by 6 years. We were a territory under the Governor Edwards, and he declared Madison County as an actual county in 1812, along with Johnson County. Johnson County became Knox County and Randolph County, St. Clair County precede us. They're the only 3 counties that are older than us, but we're going to have a bicentennial celebration here coming up in September. There's plenty of history that is here, and I just want to kind of point out if you haven't been to the Madison County History Museum, it's kind of an interesting place. Besides that, we have like all of these spots in Madison County that, if you're interested at all, the Lewis and Clark site, Madison County. Lewis and Clark set off, departed for, you know, a historic, nationally important trip right here from Wood River. Cahokia Mounds, by the way, is a World Heritage Site, and once again, it's in Madison County. It was the home of the Mississippian Indians, and it was actually a huge metropolis for the time. Between 700 and 1500 AD, the Mississippians reached a population of almost 50,000 people. You can imagine that. I mean, in that time period, a settlement of 50,000 people, it must have been something else. But that's Cahokia Mounds or Monk's Mound there. And if you haven't been to that interpretive center, you really should go. I'm going to share with you, though, I'm probably running out of time, but I just want to share with you this. I found it in a yard sale, and I'm really proud of it. It's kind of a neat thing, but it's a condensed history of Madison County, and it was printed to celebrate the Bicentennial of Madison County back in 1912. So it's really neat, but I don't know if you actually knew this. Of course you know about Lewis and Clark, you know about Lyman Trouble from Alton, who of course was the senator who wrote the 14th Amendment. You know, all of these things that occurred here. But Wood River was the site of a massacre, July 10th, 1814, an Indian massacre. And actually, if you go up to where Spencer T. Olin golf course is, off of 140, you might notice from the highway that there is a monument out there. And it's a monument that is there to kind of commemorate this massacre, this Indian massacre that happened in 1814. Now this had to do with the War of 1812. And in the War of 1812, even though at this point we're not a state, we have Fort Russell, which is garrisoned with federal troops, and we also have something called the Rangers. And these were militiamen that formed themselves in a militia, and they were deployed to fight the Indians all up and down in the Illinois territory because there were uprisings that were being instigated by the English. The English were paying the Indians to cause trouble. So this occurs in Wood River at the mouth of the Wood River. That took place at the forks of the Wood River, 2 miles east of Upper Alton. The victims were the wife and 2 children of Reason Reagan. And what actually occurred is that they were traveling from their place. Reason Reagan went to church, and the wife and the children were going to the neighbor's house, the Moore's house. And they were traveling through the woods over to the Moore's house, where they were intercepted by these Indians. And I mean, actually, I won't bore you, but I hope to kind of reproduce this and have it available in time for the Bicentennial. So I hope to kind of interest you enough that you might seek this out and find it. But what occurred is that the wife, the 2 children, the children of William Moore, and 2 brothers, William and Joel Moore, were all murdered by these Indians on a Sunday afternoon. And it all came up to the case of as they were discovering these bodies, it must have been very chilling, because, I mean, they didn't come home and it's dark, and so they went out looking for them, and here they're finding bodies laying on the pathway. And of course, they must have been terrified, because they're thinking in terms of, are the Indians still around? So they were so terrified that they couldn't really identify who was what. They just got the heck out of there and went and hid back at the blockhouse. But the next day, they were able to come back and retrieved the bodies. In the meantime, the Rangers were able to hunt down the Indians, and they chased them all the way up to the Sangamon River, where one by one, the small band of Indians tried to confuse them and make them think that they were a larger band of Indians, but one by one they split up, and they were able to hunt them down. Only one of the Indians that was involved in the raid survived, but they were able to show, they were able to determine that these were the Indians that were involved in the raid because they had the scalps. They actually had the scalps of the children and the women that were murdered in their packs, because as they took those back to the English, they got paid by the scalp. That was where the practice of scalping was, is that they actually took the top off in order to get paid. So, stop by this little monument out there by Spencer T. Olin. I think it's a fascinating little bit of history that's probably little known, and I can see I'm running out of time. I shouldn't have spent time talking about the stupid budget, but